Hello everyone, I'm Engels Tejeda, class of 2006. For me, Black History Month is a time to celebrate the contributions of Black Americans to this great nation. It's a time to reflect on the lessons we learned from instances when we didn't live up to our potential. And it is a time to strategize about how we can use our privileges, including the skills we developed at the law school, to further the cause of justice for all. It's a great time. Happy Black History Month.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth Kronk-Warner, and I have the privilege and honor of being the dean at the Quinney College of Law, and my pronouns are she and hers. And today I just wanted to take a little bit of time to reflect on February, which of course is Black History Month, and to share my thoughts on the importance of Black History Month. So first I want to acknowledge the so many people I've heard express some frustration at this idea that we only celebrate Black history in February during Black History Month. That really Black History Month should be every month of the year and every day of the year. And I certainly agree with that. But I also personally have found it very beneficial to me, as somebody who's not a member of the Black community, to take some time in February to particularly reflect upon the amazing contributions that the Black community has made to the history of the United States, to the United States today, and of course to our wonderful Quinney College of Law community. So I thought I would just take some time today to share those thoughts with you. So first, I can't help but when I reflect on Black History Month to think about the profound history that many Black citizens of the United States have, both in terms of their ancestors and in terms of their contemporary lives. I don't think we could talk about Black History Month without acknowledging that many of our fellow Black citizens came to the United States, or their ancestors came to the United States as enslaved individuals, stripped of their homeland, of their culture, of their language. Many lost their lives in the process, and it's upon their free labor and their slavery that this country was built. And I think that's a really important place to acknowledge. I think it's also an important place to start from, because think about that. Think about how your life would have been different if your ancestor had been taken from their homeland, forcibly imprisoned, enslaved, all of their resources, everything taken away from them and brought to a new country. I think when we put the history of Black Americans in the United States into that context, it makes their profound contributions to the United States even that much more impressive. I just simply can't imagine what would happen if that were to happen to me, if I were taken from my community, lost all of my resources and forced to work in another community, and how that would impact myself and my family members. So I just think that's incredibly impressive when we put the entire history of Black Americans in the United States in that larger context of the fact that many of their ancestors were enslaved and our country was built upon their backs, literally, and how far the Black community has come and how much the Black community has given back to the United States, a country that enslaved many of their ancestors. And I also think it's important to note when we talk about Black history in the United States to acknowledge that the history of oppression is still with us. So yes, of course, slavery technically ended in the 19th century, but then we moved into the history of Jim Crow and the Jim Crow laws, which were merely legal methods of slavery, of continuing to keep Black Americans oppressed and in a position of not being able to fully live out their rights and to be equal citizens of the United States. And then even though we technically had an end to Jim Crow and Jim Crow laws and an emergence of civil rights in the 1960s, many people would say that we still have systemic systems of oppression in the United States. And I think we can look, for example, to our prison population to see that that's in fact true. I thought Ibram Kendi really summed it up nicely when he made the point, and this isn't a direct quote, but when he made the point that you just have to look at our prison population to see that systemic racism is still alive and well and definitely negatively impacting the lives of many Black Americans in the United States today. So for example, I just looked up some stats on the prison population, and the most recent stats I could find were from 2010. And they found that in 2010, Black Americans were 10% of our nation's population, but they constituted 40% of the incarcerated population of the United States. So think about that, 13% of the overall population, but 40% of people who are incarcerated in the United States. So Ibram Kendi had this really good salient point that he made when he visited here the other year. And he said, that means one of two things. Either Black Americans are inherently more criminal, right? Because they would be committing crimes at a higher rate. Or alternatively, that something is inherently broken in our system of criminal justice. And some people may believe it's the former, but I think the majority of us would look at those statistics and say, it has to be the latter, and there has to be something that's fundamentally flawed with our system. So even though our system of slavery ended many, many decades ago and many generations ago, we still have these systemic systems of racism in place in the United States. And despite this, our fellow Black citizens are succeeding and giving back tremendously to our culture and our society. And that is just so incredibly impressive to me. I mean, one, it tells me that we need to work collectively together to break down these systems of oppression, but also, oh my goodness, just so incredibly impressive. And we can see Black Americans leading in every sector of our society, from intellectual leaders like Ibram Kendi to social justice leaders like Colin Kaepernick, the Black Lives Matter movement, and Tarana Burke, who helped to co-found the Me Too movement. And of course, we have political leaders who are in the news, President Barack Obama, and now our first female Vice President Kamala Harris. We have cultural icons, Lizzo, Lil Nas X, Amanda Gorman. I love the fact that this young Black poet is now becoming the voice of the United States, and we see her not just at the inauguration, but she started off the Super Bowl. I mean, the fact that we had a Black poet to start the Super Bowl, I thought was really impactful. And of course, Black Americans are not only making profound contributions to the United States as a whole on the national level, but also as part of our S.J. Quinney College of Law community. I'm so incredibly pleased and feel just so blessed to have the privilege of working with Professors George and Culver, both of whom are doing amazing work within their respective fields and are nationally prominent. And so we're really fortunate to have them on our faculty. But we also have tremendous alumni and students who are members of our community who are really making our community that much better and bringing so much to our community in terms of diverse perspectives and to just making the world a better place. And so in this February, Black History Month, I do want to take some time to reflect on the history of the United States, which is so ripe with racism and discrimination and oppression, systems that still remain in place today, but also want to acknowledge that many of our fellow Black citizens have overcome these systems of oppression, or I shouldn't even say overcome, have succeeded and contributed despite these systems of oppression, and are just amazing members of our community. And let's face it, the United States would not be half the culture and community that it is without their contributions. It's certainly the case here at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. So this February, this Black History Month, I want to take some time to reflect on our past, to think about what I can personally do as a member of the legal community to help dismantle these systemic systems of oppression that still exist today, and also acknowledge the profound contributions that so many Black Americans have made to our society and to our college's community. So please join me in celebrating Black History Month and everything that our fellow Black citizens have done for us and continue to do for us in the future. Thank you.
What I'm thinking about this Black History Month. In 2020, a new page in the book of Black history was written. A Minneapolis police officer pressed his knee into the neck of one handcuffed George Floyd. In the wake of George Floyd's death, a wave of protests swept across the country, and for at least a moment, a large portion of America looked in the mirror and acknowledged the cry for change. Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his book Between the World and Me, said, "All our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, white privilege, and even white supremacy serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscle, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth. You must never look away from this. You must always remember that the sociology, the history, the economics, the graphs, the charts, the regressions all land with great violence upon the body. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude and thankfulness to the S.J. Quinney College of Law for acknowledging and celebrating Black History Month. That said, I believe I can count on one hand, but at most two, the number of Black individuals associated with the S.J. Quinney College of Law. It is these graphs, charts, and regressions that do so much damage to the Black body I want to see change. What I'm thinking about this Black History Month and beyond is that we have a lot of work to do.
One of the most incredible experiences I've had in my life is when I was a college student studying the rape epidemic in South Africa. I heard that Nelson Mandela, who was alive at the time, was at his home base. And at the town I was working in was very close to that. So I worked kind of, hard to figure out the minibus system. We didn't have transportation. So we figured out a way to get to his house, and just without any invitation, ended up knocking at his door, and his security somehow decided not to turn us away. And there was 6 scraggly college students who had no invitation and were showing up to the president of South Africa's home. And you'd think he would turn us away. That's exactly not what happened. What happened was he invited us in. He was with his wife, who was the former president of Mozambique's wife at the time. And he invited us to have dinner with him, to stay. And of course we didn't. And we apologized for interrupting his family gathering. The lesson of that experience, having a president who invited some lowly college students to interrupt his great family event, was such a lesson to me in the humility that Nelson Mandela portrayed as a leader, and also kind of the shared forgiveness and humility that he shared in his leadership, and being able to forgive and bring so many apartheid leaders into his fold. I think Black History Month does remind me of Nelson Mandela, who is one of our greatest Black leaders. We'll always think of Nelson Mandela when I think of Black History Month, due to his kindness and his treatment of me, and in a time when he really didn't need to go out of his way to help someone else. So I think that inspires me during Black History Month, and I hope it inspires you as well.
Hi, this is Professor Clifford Roski, and the way we celebrate Black History Month at our house is to read children's books about Black history to our daughters, Evelyn and Natalie, age 6 and 4. We're really into this I Am series. So I am Harriet Tubman, I am Rosa Parks, I am Sojourner Truth, I am Martin Luther King Jr. And then there's also a really nice book called Hair Love, about a dad trying to do his daughter's hair just right, because her mom is coming home that day. It's a really sweet story, which also has a little video that we watched. So we keep it simple and educate our children.
Hello, my name is Tony Angi, and I teach international law at the University of Utah. In February, we celebrate Black History Month. And the question could be asked, what is the relationship between Black History Month and international law? In answering that question, I would like to point to the simple fact that Black intellectuals have always had a global vision. So let me take the example of a very prominent Black intellectual, and that is W.E. Du Bois. Du Bois very famously said, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the colored line, the relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa, in America and the islands of the sea." He was talking about the major issue of race, not just in the context of the United States. In the international law that existed in the 19th century and the early 20th century, European international lawyers made a distinction between civilized people and uncivilized people. It was very explicit that uncivilized peoples could not be sovereign. They have no legal personality. They cannot actually participate in the making of international law. So this is simply to say that Du Bois was absolutely right and extraordinarily perceptive in saying that race plays this fundamental role in international law and international relations. What is equally important is that Du Bois and his colleagues set about the task of trying to remedy this injustice. At the time of the drafting of the United Nations Charter, the NAACP and its officers, including Du Bois and White, all made representations to the drafters of the United Nations Charter. And these were extremely important representations dealing with fundamental questions of racial equality. There were also questions of decolonization that the NAACP raised, and broader questions of global justice. I hope that we can revisit what I would call the Black tradition of international relations and international law, and appreciate the many contributions that were made in this regard by Black scholars and Black intellectuals to international relations and thinking about these crucial issues. And I hope too that they will serve as an inspiration for us as we strive to create a better world.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leslie Francis. I'm Alfred C. Emery Professor of Law and Director of our lab's Center for Law and Biomedical Sciences here at the law school. As I suppose you can see from me visually, I'm not a person of color. So what segregated city did I grow up in? Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, in the county called Montgomery County, then and now one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. Before Brown versus Board of Education, Montgomery County, which is a very, very large county geographically, had one 12th grade school for all Black students. Think about that as busing. My elementary school was integrated. A few Black children came to it, and more than a few of my very good friends were pulled from elementary school because of their parents' opposition to integration. That was really my first experience with race. And I remember conversations with my parents about it. They were horrified. For Maryland Day, we had to perform in my elementary school. And I was assigned a role of wearing blackface, a humiliation and a horror that my mother was angry about. Elementary school students could be expected to do that in an affluent Washington, D.C. suburb in the 1950s. In the early 80s, when the D.C. Circuit still handled lots of personnel decisions, I clerked for Judge Abner Mikva on the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The government printing office right down the hill that prints all those bills that Congress writes, its unions were segregated by race and by sex, and in particular the white male unions controlled promotion decisions. Black employees and women employees at the GPO had basically no promotion opportunities. So don't think of racism as over there. Think of it as at the heart of areas like our nation's capital.
Hi, everybody. Happy Black History Month. I really am grateful for Black History Month because it is an opportunity for me to dedicate time and intention on educating myself about the Black experience here in this country. I try to spend my free time diving into Black authored books and poetry, Black stories in film, television, art, and music. I also try to be introspective about racial justice, social justice, and what I can contribute in my own universe, whether it's personal or professional. I try to think about ways that I can create awareness and sustainable change, even if it's in small ways. I appreciate this pause during February because it's important that we honor the vision and the bravery and the resilience of the Black community. So happy Black History Month.
Hi, I'm Amelia Reinhart, and I teach patent law. So for Black History Month, I'd like to talk briefly about 4 important Black women inventors who have obtained patents at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Many inventors used initials during the 19th century, and no information about race or gender is collected for patent documents. It's very possible that earlier Black women obtained patents. Researchers are busy working to identify more women and people of color in these early documents. In 1868, Martha Jones, a Black woman from Amelia County, Virginia, got a patent for an improved cornhusker and sheller. In 1884, Judy Reed, a Black woman listing Washington, D.C. as her residence, applied for and received a patent for a dough kneading machine. She marked her signature with an X. Little is known about Reed otherwise. Not long after, in 1885, Sarah Good received a patent for a cabinet bed, a precursor of the more ubiquitous Murphy bed. Sarah signed her patent herself, and much more is thought to be known about her life. She is alleged to have been born into slavery in 1855. After the war, she moved with her family to Chicago, where she met and married her husband, with whom she owned a furniture store. Clients often complained about their Chicago apartments being too small for standard beds, so Good invented a cabinet that could double as a desk, with fully functional drawers and a fold-down writing surface, and a bed with a pull-out mattress frame. This predated the original Murphy bed invention by over 25 years. Alice Parker, another notable Black woman inventor, grew up in chilly New Jersey and found her fireplace to be awful at heating her entire house. In 1919, she invented forced air heating, a concept that we all still use in our homes today. With ducts to each room, you could control the system centrally with a furnace using natural gas. You could set thermostats for each room or zone. The system she designed was never put into use because it had some safety concerns, but once those were resolved, the system using natural gas, forced air furnaces, and thermostats became the most efficient and safe mechanism for moving away from fireplaces in each room. Martha, Judy, Sarah, Alice, and countless other Black women have contributed to promoting progress in our society. We honor and thank them.
When I joined the law school in 1966, a faculty about 1/3 of its present size, there was a very clear and commonly shared goal. How could we encourage students of color and women to be interested in law school? In my law school class of about 150, there were 3 women and no one of color. The law firm which I left was unique in the Twin Cities. There were 2 women amongst the 15 lawyers, but of course, no lawyers of color and no staff of color. It's not that we were unaware. The minister of my church marched in Selma. All of us were angry, ashamed, and appalled at the American South. But it was the South, not Minneapolis, where Hubert Humphrey was senator and the Farmer Labor Party was strong. 50 years later, Minneapolis would be where George Floyd was murdered by police. At Utah College of Law, when Martin Seneca, Ben Moya, and George Higgins were all here, we thought that we had succeeded in a big first step. And a handful of students, my friend Tally Cavanis comes to mind, chose Utah to get their law degree. None of them stayed here. They didn't last long. Not because we didn't embrace them. Looking back, it was the arrogance of tokenism. We did not understand the absence of community support. We naively thought that admission to this select group was enough. The centuries of submission and exclusion could not be overcome by a friendly embrace, good words, and decisions of the Supreme Court. Those decisions were key, of course, but social justice came from changing structures, institutions, and practices. Structures, institutions, and practices embedded with racial bias which we did not see. Since there has been more exposure of embedded racial bias, most recently the work of Isabel Wilkerson comes to mind. Those men are not here now. If they were, I suspect they would say that we did not understand what we implicitly asked of them: expectation to change history by example. I wish I could say that they were the start of some important change. I can say that looking back, we better understand that head and heart in the right place are not enough. The difference between a blueprint and a building is action.